Hi, good morning. I would like to share a meditation on Romans chapter 4, verse 9, the second part of verse 9. We have been saying that Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness, was given to him as righteousness. We've been sharing about grace and faith. Yesterday, we said that God gave us a key to open the door to grace, and that gift is called faith. And here it says that faith was credited to Abraham as righteousness. Abraham was not a perfect man, as we know, as we read the text in Genesis. We realize that he's walking with God. He obeyed God's voice, but he's got lots to learn. His life has to be changed, so he'll become the blessing that God has prepared him to be. He's going to be the ancestor of many prophets, of Joseph and Mary, of the Messiah. So this man, we have his life changed by grace. Uh, let's tell about another parable. It's you when you were young, or now if you're still young, and when you go to university, your father, being very generous, is going to let you to use his card and his credit card. So you just have your driving license. So you go to university with your father's car. But as you move to another town, you don't use his car very often. You just use it to go shopping, to go to university, and you, of course, you don't use his credit card at all. You just keep it in case you need it. So one day you decided to go and visit a boyfriend or a girlfriend 6, 7 hours away, but you don't tell your father. It's going to be just over a weekend, and then you come back. You go on Friday, and you come back on Sunday evening. So nobody's going to know you've been there, and then you just be back, and life will go on. But as you go back home on Sunday evening, you're crossing this forest, just like the ones we have here in this part of France where we live, near the Pyrenees, and then you hit a deer, and the car is broken. So you ring your father, said, "Sorry, father, I lied to you. I used your car to drive a long way, and now I'm going back home, and then I hit this animal, and the car is dead." And your father, being very good, very, very generous, will say, "Well, you call the insurance company and then use the credit card to go to a hotel." That's a parable. It's a story. Some fathers are very generous like that. But anyway, that's a bit what God has done to us with grace. He has credited in our account a faith that it will help us to walk in righteousness, to live in righteousness. With Abraham was like that as well. He's not perfect. He's going to lie about his wife because he wants to protect his own life. So when these two men in two different countries, two different kingdoms, wanted to have his Abraham's wife as their wife, Abraham is going to lie because he's afraid of he wants to protect his life, and he tells them that Sarah is his sister actually. Then a terrible thing is going to happen to those two men because Sarah is actually Abraham's wife. He's walking with God and he's learning to walk with God. But every time he needs, there is faith in his account. Every time he needs, there is grace in his account. But because grace is so free, we are going to use it as we wish, and we are going to do whatever we want. We will drive away as many kilometers we want with God's car, and we are going to use his credit card every time we hit an animal or another thing. But it doesn't work like that, because if we still think that way, it's because we haven't known grace at all. Paul says that when Jesus died on the cross 2,000 years ago, for us now, you died with him. I don't think you are Galadriel, we know from the Lord of the Rings. So she was 3,000 years old. But if you're not Galadriel, you were not born when Jesus died on the cross. You see how amazing grace is? Even before the foundation of the world, Peter says, the Lamb of God appeared. The Lamb of God was there for you. That's grace. A wonderful provision for us from the beginning. I mean, before the beginning of everything. But when grace comes into our lives, grace will change us, as we said yesterday, in a way that we are not going to use God's car just like that. Because the way we think will be changed by God. Grace will change us. Because faith was credited to us as righteousness. Some people say that God's righteousness is the way he breathes, is the way he lives. He walks in righteousness. God is righteousness. And this righteousness of God has been given us through grace, by faith. And righteousness is going to change us. That's why we are not going to use grace to do evil. It's impossible. How can we? We cannot. Because grace is changing us. It's changing the way we see things. Paul, as he prays for the Colossian church, he prays that they will know the will of God. And by knowing the will of God, they are going to walk like God. They are going to bear fruit from God. And they will get to know God even more. And we know that to know is to be in a relationship with God. The more you know God, the more you're going to bear fruit, his fruit, the fruit of the Spirit, and the more you're going to know him. It doesn't end. The more you walk with God, the more you're going to be like him, and the more you're going to walk like him as well. You speak like God. You live like God. That was what grace was going to do with Abraham, to change him to the point that he was going to be considered as a friend of God. And then God, once he wants to do something, even a judgment on a city, God is going to come to talk to Abraham. Abraham is his friend. Abraham knows God. And of course, God knows Abraham from the beginning to the end. So let us live in grace, filled with God's grace. But we are not going to abuse it. We are not going to do whatever we wish. We are going to do the will of God.